What is up, creative athletes, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is part 2 of a conversation with the legendary designer and illustrator Todd Radom. If you missed part 1, I highly recommend going back and listening to all the fascinating stories that this guy shares. Todd Radom is a world-renowned graphic designer and has touched so many iconic brands in sports. He's the author of Winning Ugly and a regular contributor to ESPN's Baseball Tonight podcast. Many of us in the sports creative industry refer to him as the Toddfather, essentially the godfather of sports logos. With that being said, let's jump into part 2 of this conversation.
Hey Todd, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you as a renowned sports logo designer, if we didn't ask you a few technical questions. I remember when I first started here with the Dodgers, I overlapped with another logo design great, Dan Simon. And, I was in my mid-20s at the time, and I just, I knew how to do things, but I wanted to see how one of the greats did them. So, when he would leave for the night, I would pop in his CD files. We had like a CD library.
Dude,
The statute of limitations expired on that. I hope we can tell him about that in person.
I don't even think those CDs exist. I think they've been lost to the ages, but
they're with zip disks.
Zip disks. We did have zip drives as well, and floppy disks. And I would just pour over all of his logo creations, just so I could see exactly kind of how he did this and that, how he layered things, how he would do a curve here, or just technical things like that, just looking at how someone else does them. So I guess, we have about 4 or 5 technical questions we want to ask you. And there's no right or wrong, obviously. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. But I caused kind of a little bit of an uproar on social media a few years back amongst the design community when I said that when I design a logo, I never use layers, and people were like, "What the heck?" So, Todd, when you design a logo, how many layers are you a multi-layer guy or a no-layer guy?
I am multi-layer when it comes to releasing the art. If it needs to have a background that, here's the logo against the dark background. Command 2, yes, lock that mother up and lock that layer up, right? But when it comes to designing, reduce the sauce, simplify it. Why do you need layers? Like, we got groups. I am decidedly unlayered when it comes to designing it. Less is more. And I think it really comes from this place where, like, years ago, when we first started working in Illustrator, you had a split screen. It was like stupidly complex. And like, you'd release the files to people who didn't know what the hell they were doing with them. We didn't know as designers all that much. So something like a layer that somebody didn't get into, or an extraneous point, like way off the artboard in Illustrator, would be like the cause for disaster, right? So keep it simple, get it down to like its most distillable size. Yeah, less is more.
Love it,
man. Hold up, maybe I'm not tracking with you guys. Are you saying the difference between like just designing with no regard to the layer panel versus like, hey, you know what, let me put the H in a, like, in a group, and then let me put the star in its own layer, like, and let me put the, is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, like
I think like the layer panel should be one layer to me. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay, that is what we're talking about.
I group things all the time that are, like going to be the same color kind of thing, right? But yeah,
got it.
Now I'm also
Todd Radom doesn't use layers. It just validated me.
All right, now keep going with the questions, Ross. But I'm going to show you guys something sitting right in front of me. I use a mouse from like 2005. I use this keyboard. I've got my keyboard commands, which, I'm like sitting there, like F key shortcuts that I've had for 20 years. Like, everybody's got their own thing, to your point. But
what I love too? You just said Command 2, and then everyone knows what you're talking about.
That's Command 2, Command 3. Those are important things. Yeah.
Hey Todd, do you remember? Speaking of layers, do you remember the layer note that I sent you in Illustrator?
Yes. Yes, you did. You were like, it's making me laugh just thinking about it, Chris. Is what it is. It was the best layer note I've ever received.
Well,
So
what was it? Or
it
is this
was,
confidential information now?
oh man, I think we're past that. He was working on a logo on one side and I was working on the other side. And we were, whether we were supposed to know it or not, it didn't matter. But I knew it was him, and I, wanted to respect everything that was going on in there. And we were having to send logos back because there were so many tweaks. And I said, if budget, I'm gonna send him a note. And I put a note in the layer, in the actual layer panel, and I wrote like, "Hey Todd, what's going on? Incredible work," or like, "Hey, hope you don't mind I changed this."
Like a little Easter egg. It was a little Easter egg.
Yeah,
Totally.
man. And we didn't talk about it until years later. And so
that's
it
right.
was just,
The cone of silence came down, and now it's up. So
that's such a nerdy designer thing that only we can appreciate as a community.
Yeah, that's who we are. But I want to hear some more process questions because
let's talk about ribbons. Ribbons are, we feel like you're the master of ribbons. You'll create something that's so simple, and we're like, golly, why didn't we think of that? Whether the curvature or the flare or the shadow. But talk about ribbons. Give us some pointers. Just how do you create them? Some do's and things to be aware of, because those could get on. Just being straight up, they could look horrific in a lot of ways, real quick.
Well, there you go. Like, too much can be too much with ribbons, right? We talk about reducing the sauce and distilling things down, but I'm always mindful. My ribbons keep getting simpler, and it's something I'm associated with. And to be honest, like, ribbons in sports, they feel special. They feel celebratory. Old time sports logos, like think about English soccer logos and stuff, to really go off the grid. Those are like rooted in heraldry, right? Like, English kings and stuff. So ribbons, I think, need to be, talk about thinking in layers, not executing layers, but, think about like foreground, midground, background, and simplicity and flow, or not flow, right? So I'm always mindful of that. And I try not to overdo it. I will say that combining a straight ribbon with a curved ribbon in the same mark can cause like visual seasickness. So again, less can be more.
Okay. Yeah,
that's great.
Good.
I know it's like you can't really tell someone how to do it. You kind of have to like feel it, right? You kind of have to have that feel. Yeah. It takes practice. Todd, I studied your style for many, many years before I met you, and a lot of your ribbons, the original Jackie Robinson logo comes to mind, and I'm just, I don't remember how old I was, but I was just thinking, wow, like I gotta figure out how to do this. This is cool, and it took me many years to even come close to that. It takes practice, and the thing you said about flowing is yes. That definitely is part of it, because I look back at some of my older logos and where I attempted to do a Radom like ribbon, and it was, I look at it now just horrified. It looks terrible.
Hey, and listen, Ross, I mean, I've got some like from my earliest days that I'm like, man, like the undulations, if you want to use that word, are like all the way out there. It's like, just calm it down, man. Like, and these days, more often than not, I'm just doing something like just like straight, no curves are minimal. Like, you gotta like, there's got to be nuance there, but it's got to be direct. And again, too much can be way too much.
Yeah,
you're right.
So good.
Here's a style guide question. Sometimes you get that final style guide, and you think there's one logo, but there's actually like 6 to 10 different logos that, oh no, this logo's for this application, and this logo's for embroidery, this logo's for this logo's for that. Now, are you a believer that one mark needs to work at all applications and sizes, or are you okay with having different but similar marks for other applications, like really reduced sizes or field paintings or whatever?
Yeah. No, and we live in a complicated world, right? Where one size kind of
Yes.
can't fit all, but you want to make things bomb proof to the greatest extent that you can. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. It's interesting you asked that question, Ross, because this summer, dealing with this Korean club that I referenced, we wound up putting together a style guide for them, which and they're very like culturally, it's a very exacting, detail oriented culture. They really were looking for things that went beyond the single mark, right?
Mm.
And so we looked at Olympic style guides, Super Bowl style guides, everything from the simplest to the most complicated. And like most things in life, you wind up somewhere in the middle, right? So ideally, if I'm going to put, let's say, a commemorative mark out there, as opposed to a Super Bowl logo, which is really going to get, 3D'd and all this stuff going on, I'm going to put four logos out there: two color, two black and white, one against two, each against a light background and a dark background. And the only difference theoretically should be the fact that the dark background should have a white TM popping out against it, right? So
Right.
make it easy. There's always like the weakest link in the chain when it comes to people who are dealing with the stuff that we deal with, right? We all know that. There is some licensee or some partner who is going to like take it and really do something rough with it. So just give them the ability to like plunk it out of there and not have to think about it and not get
Yeah.
paralyzed with, oh my God, what the hell do I do with this?
Yeah. That's
Less is more. I'm a big believer with everything in life. Just streamline.
yeah. That's so true, man. Because that's the fear, right? It's like when you do have a small mark that's like for, under a certain size, that some dummy's gonna grab that and put that on the side of the building, right? Versus
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
that's
totally. And again,
yeah.
knowing that there's nuance involved, that there are instances where, one of you mentioned gradients before, where you would uh, be very hesitant to do this 10 years ago. But of course, we live in a primarily digital world now. What's the percentage
Hmm.
of stuff that we work on that gets applied to print now? It's nothing, right? I mean, it still
Yeah.
exists. So you've got to respect the fact that it needs to be, deployed and executed accordingly. But yeah, less is going to be more, and simpler is better. And don't make somebody like, again, be paralyzed with fear that they're using the wrong mark. Just make it as easy as possible.
All right. Speaking of simplicity and complexity, um, how do you feel about strokes when it comes to a sports logo? Is it absolutely necessary to have a mark that has a version with a stroke, or could it, just float with no strokes?
I think it's better to keyline things because, again, you want to make it bomb proof, bulletproof. No one's ever going to see it, right? It's got to be the right kind of weight. You guys know the proportions of what that TM might be like outside of it should be good. But if you do not plate something and it looks like a mistake, it's going to like gnaw at us
Yeah,
for
forever.
days, weeks, months, whatever it is. So it's better to be safe than sorry, I think.
Yeah.
But then there are some marks, the likes of which, Ross's LA, right? I got hats with the LA, same with this Mets thing, that when you outline it, it just looks wrong, right? Like there's no reason to do that. So that LA can and does exist in both positive and negative form, and that's a pretty simple one. But I think there are probably more complex examples that again we want to give clear direction about,
Yeah.
and are going to be like easily adaptable against different and varied backgrounds.
Like an event mark. Like you want to ironclad that bad boy and just you can drop that
No
anywhere.
question about it. And there was
A
a
patch.
time, I think particularly like 5, 10 years ago, where broadcast and primary branding, let's call it, were bumping up against each other. So we were having these open marks, which really did not look awesome against a photographic background.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm always mindful of the fact that there are people who are going to be listening to this right now whose task is to just push stuff out to social, and they're going to have to pop a one color logo up against a photographic background with varied tonality, and like, let's make it easy for them. And let's, because we want those marks to work in unison with the imagery and not present a barrier to entry, basically. So how do you achieve that? There's a way to do it.
Good
Todd, it's
stuff.
funny you mentioned that because the Dodgers shooting ball logo. When we did our little refresh in 2011, we were finding that people were having trouble using that logo. Like if it was on a blue background or a photographic background, um, our shooting ball logo just wouldn't work. For everyone out there, it's our logo with the script and the ball, the tennis ball, and the streaks. So we did create that that exact logo, but put a circle around it, which
Yeah.
has always been kind of one of our logos, but never official. So we created that logo so people could just plop it anywhere. And it's just like, dummy proof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and particularly at a tiny size, on par with,
Mhm.
it's always so interesting. Like, I think, as human beings, forget sports fans, forget sports creatives, we are all seeing these logos distill down to very basic things. An example would be, the Pittsburgh Pirates, which previously had this, this pirate guy, right? Which is now a secondary logo. They just have a P, like their headwear P, right? Maybe it's not enough. The Royals have stepped back from
Yeah,
something that was far more complex years ago to something that has been distilled down to, the very essence of their brand. And again, how do they stack up against one another? If you look at, look on your phone, and if I want to see what the scores are, right, and you'll see just like the bugs that represent team logos next to the scores, that pretty much tells us where we are, and it's only going to get more distilled, I think.
that's
Hey,
right.
Todd.
Things are just becoming simpler.
Yeah.
Hey, Todd, here's another technical question. I'm curious where you stand on this. When starting a logo, you specifically, I know everyone has their own styles, but um, do you draw first? Do you sketch first? Do you just go straight into Illustrator and get it done? And we're talking like not constraint with time here. We're not talking about, hey, this is, just popped up. We need you to get us out of jam. This is like you have time. You want to do it your way.
Yeah, and Chris, that qualifier you just gave, that makes all the difference in the world, because we all know there are times you just got to like take off the diving board into the Illustrator pool and make it happen. But ideally, I would love to either, I'm doodling stuff in a book. There's like Stapleton stuff with a ballpoint pen, really rough, or doing it in Procreate on my iPad, particularly with
Mhm.
flowing lettering. Script lettering is a great example. Like, you just start to build that up and refine it, and it doesn't take too long, and just airdrop that thing into Illustrator and have at it. Um, but it should feel tactile, ideally, and stem from here. And I think, again, we're all sitting here staring at a screen. There's something nice to be able to, like I said, even if it's with a ballpoint pen, kind of like jotting something down for 5 seconds and then diving into the digital pool. But ideally, I'll start that way.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's how Todd Radom does it, everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody does what they do and it all
I'm staying
works,
quiet.
and yeah, I don't think there's a one size fits all approach. And I will say, I do, again, I love with the iPad, even if it's just something, one color really quick, getting the essence of some piece of lettering and then just like slamming it in there and perfecting it in Illustrator. You can really, it's an incredibly powerful tool.
You know, speaking of, changing the subject from technical to, I guess, more inspirational. Man, you're like a mentor and inspiration to so many when it comes to, sports design and creativity. You're a friend of Connect. You're always welcome. You need to show up more. We've talked about that, but it's in a slot where you have your annual commitments. But for those of you uh who are listening, we may move the whole conference just so Todd can attend. But
Oh, and do it here in Philly, and we could have a
there you
party on
go.
my roof. Got a great view of the skyline. Like, make it happen.
Oh, party spot taken care of.
But talk to us a little bit about mentors, man. I mean, you mentioned a few here just as we've been talking, but have there been, talk to us maybe about a few people that have kind of really helped you along the way that specifically when it comes to, sports and design or even out of it, just kind of have changed the way you think about things.
That's a good question. And, when you get to the point that I am at this point, age and having so many years in a career, you kind of have to dig deep. I will say this, none of us do it without somebody else, right? A hand up. I didn't really have any formal mentors outside of, as I said, my own family, right? All that DNA coursing through me and seeing people who were actually making a living in a creative field. That was very powerful. I had some great instructors in School of Visual Arts, even somebody I'm not trying to name drop, but somebody like a Milton Glaser, who I knew a little bit, and being able to go to his studio and just talk about stuff, talk about
Wow.
design, this expansive thing. The real lesson that I learned from him, both directly and indirectly, was if you're a creative, you don't have to be one thing. I'm not just a designer. I can be a writer. I can be an illustrator. I could be a typographer. I could be a researcher. Don't get pigeonholed and, do all of them and be serious about all of them. But on the other side, being able to pay it forward, particularly at this Toddfather stage in my life, and have mentees both formally and informally, is incredibly rewarding because you guys are there probably. There comes a point where things flip, and you know how to do it with your hands, right? But there's so much that resides in your brain, and you're able to articulate this and pass things down. And it's not that profound. It's not like bringing the tablets down from the mountain, but it's just being supportive, um, especially on social media where it's not the most forgiving space, as we all know. So to give a follow to maybe a young designer, something as simple as that, who's working for a college, who they're going to say, whatever, it's not about me, but it's about being supportive of the community. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that Connect has helped to literally connect so many disparate pieces so valuably. And we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And our sports design community is bigger than myself, bigger than any one of us. And to, again, see it as diverse as it is in every conceivable sense and bringing that forward to people maybe who don't look or sound like me is necessary and good for me.
Good stuff,
Wow.
man. Yeah. And I want to say that honestly probably I'm in the same boat, man. There's you it's so easy to get caught up in the just the chaos of, the work to forget to make time or, just respond to an email or a post when someone, tags you just or even just to, without even doing that, just going in and saying, "Hey, good work." I know for me that's happened a number of times. And it just gives you that motivation to know you're doing the right thing. And also, like you said, opens the door to be able to have a quick call or I know I've sent you a few things in my past. Just, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? Am I
Yeah,
crazy? Am
totally.
I on the
Just a
right
quick
path?
text. It happens every day. And I think all of this is rooted, and I'm sure you guys would agree, that being a creative, working in a creative field, it's not brain surgery. There's no right or wrong, right? If you cut the wrong side of the brain or some heart transplant, you're going to kill the patient. We don't kill anybody, so nobody is right about this, right? And it could be humbling. I talk about art school before. Critique is rooted in criticism. Nobody likes to be criticized. So being supportive, and hopefully, being constructive in your criticism, I'll get stuff every day. I'm sure you guys do too. Help me out with this. What am I doing? If you could pick out one thing that maybe you could say, like, if I were you, I would think about this because of this, and not just say, this is the most awesome thing in the world, or we wouldn't do this, but say, this thing's it's awful. um, that helps to fill in the gray areas, look at it that way, and hopefully makes people better creatives, better designers, and also comport themselves in ways that are acceptable in unsocial and not having those shooting from the hip hot takes that some people love.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, and I've told you many times, you've always served as an inspiration to me, especially in the earlier stages of my career when I was just an aspiring uh, logo designer. Um, who is that person for you? Who is a creative? Well, it doesn't even need to be a creative, but who's someone that has inspired you from afar? And it doesn't even need to be in sports.
That's a great, I love architecture, right? And because I'm terrible with numbers, like a lot of designers, like I'm fascinated by building of bridges and like how these things work and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm always looking at architects, both famous and not so famous. And I love reading about this stuff because I can't do it. You know what I mean? There are, to bring it back to sports and our community, and I don't want to throw names out because I don't want to exclude anybody, but there are people just in the trenches, as we say, like doing stuff every single day. And I'm like, damn, that team or that person who I know is affiliated with that team is just making it happen 162 games a year or 82 games a year or 16 games a year, 18 games a year, whatever it is. So, like I said, I don't want to exclude, but, there are incredible, to throw a name out there of somebody that I work with who I mentioned before, like somebody like an Ice Cube is like, there's a guy who's like, you know, didn't grow up under great circumstances, had a pretty intact family, so he was lucky that way. But like he studied architecture. Like that's kind of what brings he and I together
Wow.
in a lot of ways. He went to college for one semester to be an architectural draftsman. But like
Wow.
Well,
how does your eye for that get applied to music or architecture itself, or structural or design or being an arena and seeing like, this is way too much on an LED screen, dial the color back a little bit. It's like, it's pretty, he shakes me out of my preconceived notions sometimes. And I'll say, well, this
mhm.
is the way we should do this. And he's like, why, why? Ask yourself why or why not? And yeah, it's like kind of an obvious name to drop, and it's a person who's known, but it's a good example of, I think, somebody whose thinking has not calcified the more seasoned and successful and older he has gotten.
It's good.
Incredible.
Yeah, good stuff, man. It's always good to I'm kind of in the similar boat, and it's probably something we've talked about, I think, as well. Just architecture is just so, it's to me, it's just another level of design where you're adding like actual safety.
Yeah, with
You're actually
structure built onto it, like it's got to
yeah,
support a load.
yeah,
What we do kind of has to do that. If you glom on too many elements, or if
yeah,
you're not going to like, yeah. But yeah, it's fascinating to me, and like I said, partially because I can't do it.
yeah.
I
I'm
can
the
imagine it, but
yeah.
yeah,
I'm the same with fine art as well. A lot of times, folks think, well, oh, can you just create that illustration? We're like, well, no, that's like a detailed fine art like illustrator. That's when it helps to know friends, right?
yeah,
Um,
and like thinking dimensionally, like sculpture, like I was never good with that in school, just because it was an area that I just couldn't process for some reason. And so I do admire that kind of thing. And I've got friends who are fine artists who are incredibly gifted people. And I'm like, to have the vision, we are given a task to essentially sell something, right? This is commercial artwork. If you want to look at it that way, it's not meant to, you know, it's a. I'm going off on a tangent, but it's a different side of the brain that hopes to achieve the same thing. And what is that? It's to reach a person, a consumer,
yeah.
a lover of art, elevate their experience or part them with their money in some cases.
Oh, for sure. Um, so hot seat questions. Let's get to those. This will be our um kind of outro of this interview. And again, as Ross stated, there's no wrong or right. Um, but gonna let Ross shoot shoot the shot, and we'll keep going.
So Todd, these are just, we're just tossing these at you, and you just say whatever answer first comes to mind. And our first question is a very important question for creatives. What is your go-to caffeinated drink?
Coffee, black coffee. I will brew up a pot of black coffee in the morning and I'll keep it rocking until noon, afternoon. At this point in my life, I don't want to do any, but it's coffee. I really don't drink soft drinks. Occasionally I'll have like a Coke Zero with a slice of pizza or something, but coffee injected into my veins, but only up to noon.
Black coffee. No,
Black coffee.
nothing
Yep.
else. No sweetener.
No, it's too much
That's old
sugar. I like,
school.
yeah, sugar is like, we all love sugar, but like less of it. I can, not to say that
I
I
love
wouldn't
it.
binge on some cookies every once in a while, but I don't keep it in the house. Black coffee.
You know what, Todd? I just realized, and I have another print over here. I'm not gonna grab it, but it's the Cuba print. It
Oh
is
yeah,
so
right.
beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And I know you made a trip that like inspired you, but uh, you don't have Cuban in your blood, do you? Is that
I'm sorry, come again?
do you have Cuban in your blood? I
Oh,
don't.
not at all. No, I'm
Okay.
like the whitest European guy imaginable.
I just remember when you designed it, I was like, dude, that's like you nailed it because baseball's so specific and important to Cuba. And my wife's Cuban. I mean, so it was, and then you just mentioned coffee, and that's also part of their culture.
Yeah, so
Uh,
so just like I know you're hitting these things real quick, but a 5 second aside, went down to Cuba in the late '90s with a permit from the United States Treasury Department
Incredible.
to work on a baseball project, a book, and they are in the stands at Cuban professional baseball games with like a metal thermos on their back, walking around pouring coffee for people. So that shit's
Oh,
high test. That is like
I love
rocket
that.
fuel, man. I was just down in Puerto Rico last month too. That was outstanding coffee. But let's keep it rolling.
Oh man. I tell you what, man, we do need to link up the three of us and have coffee because we're all pretty passionate about it. All right. Your desk, um, organized or messy? What's your situation?
I try to keep it organized to the best I can do. I have like a pile of stuff right now. I would say more organized than messy. I'm looking at it right now. If I could show you what I'm looking at, I could put my hands down. I've got like pens and markers and Sharpies and stuff in like little containers. I think it's pretty organized.
It looks pretty tight from here.
Yeah, I like to keep it tight.
What team has the best uniform in sports currently?
Wow.
All right. Do we have to talk about the Fanatics MLB situation?
Oh my God.
I
I'm
don't think I'm allowed to
sorry.
speak on
I know. I
that.
know. I can't. All
I
right.
have opinions.
I do too. And I will say that I am a traditionalist in certain ways. So, if I'm going to look at a uniform and I think of the totality of it, I love the St. Louis Cardinals, right? Because of just the expansiveness.
Mhm.
Your Dodgers. I'm not going to put anything in that I've created, right? The Detroit Red Wings are beauty, right? Like the current, and then like I go to some modern classics as well. I'd have to give it some thought, some additional thought. I think, the proportions of numbers, which we have talked about in certain
Mhm.
instances that maybe should be a little larger. I think there are, yeah, like it's a long conversation.
Yeah, that's another podcast.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with those ones
It
you
could be two
mentioned, though.
hours too.
Yeah. All right, man. Favorite type hoodie type, sweatshirt, pullover, zip up. What's
Well,
your
here in the East, it depends on time of year, right? So like I'm here in a t-shirt right now, that would be ideal, but probably a hoodie. I like the crisp weather.
I could see
I get a lot of swag too, so I have like an amazing amount of apparel, both high and low, which is
I
a nice problem to have, right? So
Todd, I could see you running the streets, man, with a hoodie and like, you know, like
For
a muscle
sure.
car and doing some crime activity.
eh, you know, I'm living in the middle of the city here too, so don't ask for what you might just get. No, I wouldn't do that. And you gotta, footwear is important too. I'm not like a huge sneaker guy necessarily, but I've got 10 pairs of sneakers, something like that. Gotta have some drip. Everything's gotta.
What's your go-to? What's your go-to pair?
Chuck 70 high tops.
Nice.
They've got a little bit of arch support. You can walk around the whole day on them, and they just like they'll kind of go with anything.
That's absolutely true. All right.
I couldn't imagine you as anything else, but if you weren't a designer, what would you be?
That's a great question, Ross. I don't, I can't imagine. Maybe a teacher of some sort, like a history teacher, right?
I see that.
But it was like, again, not necessarily predestined, but I've been doing it my whole life. My last job that was not as a designer was a summer job working on a garbage truck, like loading. I was 18 years old, so wouldn't want to be much respect for people who work with their hands and work manual labor. I'm not me. I'm soft at this point.
For the first 10 years, of my life, you can ask anyone in my family, I wanted to be a garbage truck guy.
Well, it was a pretty cool thing.
Pretty
like jump off
now.
the back of that thing and load that shit in there. It was, I mean, just knowing that it was just going to be for summer was pretty good. But you stunk at the end of the day, and there was no way to get that
I
stuff
can
off.
imagine.
Yeah.
All right. If you could choose one team, and that team said, we'll pay you your going rate. You have a blank slate. You could do with us as you please. Logos and uniforms. Which team would you love to work with and put your Toddfather Midas touch on?
Well, I can't say Ross's Los Angeles Clippers anymore. So
I
that
know,
would have
right?
been the answer.
Oh,
no,
man.
that was just me being glib.
That's why I hesitated. I
ass.
said, you know what? I don't want to get in trouble. Let's let Todd get in trouble.
Well,
Go ahead.
so to answer your question,
you won't get
Chris,
in any trouble. It's probably something we all know.
No, it actually wouldn't be. And so I've always gotten this what's your bucket list thing, right? And I don't want to come out the wrong way, but I kind of done so many things at this point that I've always said I would love to design an Asian professional baseball team because it's baseball, but it makes you think. And I did that this year. So what would it be? Outside of my
That's
so
cool.
Now it's kind of maybe it would be some Manchester United or Barcelona. I'm not a soccer guy by any means, but I want a challenge. I want something that's really going to make me study and get out of my comfort zone and learn a different culture. And it would probably be something like that.
Yeah. Something where if you get it wrong, they'll send you someone's finger in a bag. Because you're talking European soccer. This is centuries of
level of passion. But then you say to yourself geez, if the New York Yankees, like I said before, they're undesignable, you would be paralyzed with fear. What the hell am I supposed to do with this? No, you don't want that kind of thing, or I don't want that kind of thing.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. This is not a hot seat question, but I'm just curious. Do championships make logos great?
Absolutely. Winning elevates a look always, right? I'll give you an example. My Angels look, which I created in 2001. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing ever. They come out of the box, they win their only World Series, first World Series appearance and only World Series appearance in 2002. Gave them some equity going forward. Now, why they've stuck with it, a whole bunch of different criteria, but what is it about the LA Lakers, to name Ross's nemesis team? It's not a particularly sophisticated logo. It's a weird color combination in a lot of ways, but winning elevates all. And in the case of your Astros, Chris,
Absolutely.
the Astros have had this varied, some iconic looks, some questionable looks, some transient looks. But when you get that look that won a World Series, much less 2 World Series, been in all those, it's probably there to stay for a little while, whatever the merits.
Yeah. Yeah. So good,
For
man.
sure.
Dude, thanks so
Better to
much
be
for your,
lucky than good. One more time.
yeah. And,
Absolutely.
and that's something that I always, especially internal, right? Like, you don't always get to pick, who you work for. Of course, obviously you apply, but, when you start working for a team, you just get embedded to it. And I think both Ross and I worked for a team that, well, at least we had not experienced, a championship. So we were fortunate enough to go through that. It just, like you said, man, it changes everything. Um, and
Wait,
really
hey, listen,
changes.
real quick. One of my greatest LLs or one of the greatest MLC Connect, moments every year when I was in there was like seeing somebody with a new championship ring. Like, can I try that on? Like, Tim with the Red Sox or,
Yeah,
Brian with the Giants or like you guys, like, right? I mean, like you want in song with the Braves, right? You want to spread the love and see your friends succeed and get the
That's right.
jewelry. And so it's pretty well spread around in the baseball space, at least. But you root for people, and we know people, so it was always a
yeah.
cool thing to see.
Yeah, man. And I will say it's if I haven't said it before, man, I extremely value our friendship, man. You're truly an industry changer. I can't wait. Anytime I think you're done and kind of hanging it up, you're not even remotely close to it, man. The stuff you've been working on lately with Big Three and like you said, the international, man, you just never cease to amaze us, man.
Well,
So
we're creative people. We don't want to retire. We want to maybe work a little less, travel more, whatever you do, make more, work less, whatever that's going to be, and get hit with new challenges. And I'm mindful to be candid, to be absolutely candid about taking up space. I don't want to be taking work away from younger people who could probably, bring something unique to the table at this point. But I love what I do. I still feel as passionate about it as I did 30, 40 years ago. I'm still the guy that gets under the hood of the car and takes it apart and could put it back together. I like doing the consulting stuff too when that comes up, but you live the creative life and it's I'm convinced it's from cradle to grave. So
that's well said, man.
Todd, I just want to give you a personal shout out and thank you. As I've said before, you inspired me from afar, early in my career. Um, you probably don't remember this, but in 2012, when the Dodger Stadium 50th anniversary logo that I designed came out in the style guide, somehow Todd found out my email and emailed me unsolicited
I
and
don't remember it.
basically gave me, well, Todd, you basically complimented my logo design, and I'll never forget that. I still to this day really appreciate that. It was a seminal moment in my career, and I just really appreciate you, man.
Well, I
Thank
appreciate
you.
both of you and I appreciate our whole community and Ross. Like that's the kind of paying it forward. Just a little gesture can go a long way. And I appreciate you guys for who you are as good friends and for what you do professionally, but also bringing this community together in a way that was never done before. And I'm very lucky to know a lot of the people I know that I probably would not have met, especially in person, and been able to hang with and maybe have a meal with, if not for what you guys do. So I'm grateful for both of you. And an opportunity like this to sit here and Zoom and kind of shoot the shit means that, it makes me want to do it in person that much more. So we got to figure it out.
We do, brother.
Let's do it.
Appreciate it, man. All right, man. We'll send you
Appreciate you,
off.
brother.
God bless.
Thank you.
Talk soon, man.
Thank you
Love you,
so much.
man.
Appreciate it, both of you.
All right, friends. Well, thanks for joining us on the Creative Athlete Podcast. We hope you learned something new or felt inspired to approach your work in a different way. If you heard something you liked, be sure to like and subscribe, comment, or share this episode with a friend. Also, don't forget to register for MLC Connect 2024 on July 16th through 18th. We'll talk soon. See you at Fort Field.